If you go into medical school and you graduate with $500,000 in debt, and your average interest rate on your loans is like 7 or 8%, which is kind of how things are trending now, that's going to take you the rest of your life to pay off. If you end up practicing as a pediatrician making $150,000, $200,000 a year, because really you're not making $200,000 a year. Half of that in some form goes to tax. And then you've got other costs of living on top of that: malpractice insurance, disability insurance, life insurance.
In this conversation, I talk with a good friend of mine, Bryan Pearson. We're both medical students at the University of Texas Medical Branch, and we're both in our third year of medical school. And after having this conversation, I told him that I really wish I could have gone back and listened to something like this before I even started medical school. We talk about so many important things as far as what medical school entails, what residency entails, decisions that you have to make as far as a medical career, and whether you are considering medicine, you're already in medicine, or you have nothing to do with medical school. I hope that you're able to pull as much out of this conversation as I did. We talk about a lot of really interesting topics, including motivation, time management, fear, uncertainty, relationships, especially in medical school, and much more. So thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy the following conversation as much as I did with Bryan Pearson. I have some questions for what medical school is like generally, what your experience has been in medical school. But before we start with that, do you mind just kind of giving people a brief overview of what medical school entails generally?
Yeah. I guess for someone that doesn't have any background in medicine.
Yeah, like a family member that has no idea what medical school is
I'll
like.
talk a little bit about what it takes to get into medical school. You have to do 4 years at an undergraduate university and get a bachelor's, and it can be in anything. You'd think if you were going to medical school, it would have to be like anatomy or human physiology, but you can major in anything, and then as long as you have the prerequisites for medical school and take the MCAT and everything else that goes with the application, you can get in. But every school is a little bit unique in their requirements, but medical school is 4 years. Your first 2 years are, this is true of most medical schools, are more classroom-based, and then your last 2 years, or your clinical years, you do more rotations through different specialties. Your first couple years, you learn all the basics: anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, pathology, histology, disease. And then the way that we do it here at University of Texas Medical Branch is we, after we've covered some of the basics, we go by organ systems. So we'll do, cardiovascular and pulmonology, and then renal and electrolytes, and then GI system, and so forth. So after your first couple of years, you take a really big test, step 1. It recently transitioned to pass-fail, but for the first couple of years, that's what you're really focused on, is passing that exam and learning everything that you need to, and that sets the foundation for the next couple of years. And then your third year, you're in different rotations. I'm currently in my OBGYN rotation, so I was delivering babies on Thursday. It was kind of fun. But there's 7 core clerkships you rotate through and different specialties. And then at the end of third year, you take step 2, which is another big board exam, and that one's scored and is a big part of your application to residency. They want to know that you can perform well on board exams, because as a resident and beyond, you take board exams still. So really you're studying a lot for that. And your fourth year, the beginning of your fourth year, you apply to residency programs for the specialties or specialty that you're interested in, and interview. And then towards the end of fourth year, you find out where you matched or if you matched, and then go from there. So that's kind of a general overview of a little bit how it works and everything else.
So 4 total years, and then on to residency.
Mm-hmm.
And what does residency look like? Like, can you give an overview of that?
It varies by specialty. So the shortest residencies are 3 years, emergency medicine, family medicine, and probably some others. And then like a neurosurgery residency is 7 years, I believe. If you want to do, so the first year of residency, everyone calls the intern year. So everyone's an intern in their first year of residency. Depending on what specialty you went into, it might be more of a broader year, maybe not even in your specialty. For example, I'm interested in ophthalmology, so when you match into a residency program, your first year, your intern year, most of that year is spent in internal medicine. So even though you've matched into ophthalmology, your first at least 9 months or so of being a doctor are in internal medicine, because it provides a foundation for the rest of your residency. And then from then on, you're more specialty specific. So every program's a little bit different. Surgical subspecialties usually start with a year of general surgery first, but residency, they say, is the most challenging of all of your medical school training, because it's the most time demanding and
long hours.
At that point, you're a physician. You're evaluating patients, putting in orders, doing surgeries, or whatever your residency entails. But you have a lot of responsibility, and you're still learning. After residency, if you choose to, you can pursue a fellowship where you become subspecialized in a particular field. So let's say you want to be a cardiologist, you'd start with 3 years of internal medicine and then apply for a fellowship in cardiology, and then do a cardiology fellowship that's 3 years afterwards. So a cardiologist does 6 years of training post-medical school. So it's a lot of school.
It is crazy how long it actually is. So when you actually total it up, you've got undergrad. Some people get even like a master's. Some people have like kind of a separate career, but you don't have to. Minimum is undergrad, on to medical school. So that's 4 years, and then residency and maybe a fellowship.
Yeah.
So long. And speaking of hours, you mentioned how like residency can just be like really long hours. Just focus on medical school with what you and I have experienced so far. What has been the biggest difference in your mind between your undergraduate education and medical school education?
I feel like in medical school, there's a little bit more autonomy in your schedule, which can be good or bad. In undergrad, you're expected to go to 5 or 6 different classes in a semester. You have to show up to lectures and be present. There's assignments and regular exams. In medical school, especially at least here in the first couple of years, a lot of lectures are optional. There's some that are required, but there's other stuff that's optional, but there are lots of online resources that most medical students use nowadays.
Which is weird to me. When I came to medical school, I thought it was going to be very lecture heavy.
Same.
Some old dude in a classroom teaching to a big lecture hall of students, and we're all like scrambling to take notes. But like, I have not had that experience yet, and I probably will never have that.
That's how it used to be. I mean, my dad was a physician, or is a physician. When he went to medical school, it was, you show up, you listen, you take notes, and if the professor says, hey, this is high yield for the exams, or you better know this for your boards, you paid special attention to that topic. And read textbooks. Yeah. But nowadays...
That's the other thing. We don't even touch textbooks.
I mean, we'll do specific readings out of certain chapters from time to time, but a lot of our learning is videos that, third-party companies have put together that have studied, how the boards test us, and they've put together creative ways to remember things and things like that. So a lot of our time is spent studying, by watching videos and doing electronic flashcards and things like that to help us retain all this information. And then the stuff that the school teaches us is almost like on the side, like in addition. But there's autonomy in that you kind of decide your study schedule. You're not required to go to as many classes, but it can be good or bad because, it can be difficult to always be consistent and get through, a certain amount of study material within a time frame when, you don't have a professor breathing over your neck, like, you got to get this done. It's just, you have one big test and you got to be prepared for that big test at the end of your block. So,
that also surprised me when I started medical school, is just how much of a time management game it really is. Because in undergrad, you can kind of get away with not studying and then cramming towards the end, but at least in our medical school, our first course was anatomy, and I just learned very quickly you cannot cram for that. Like, you have to be reviewing very regularly the material in order to be ready. Even though it's like weeks and weeks, like you're saying, till that big exam, it's like you need all that time, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah. Part of my background is being a runner. Like, I ran in college, and to me, it's kind of like being in shape. Like, you can't just decide in a weekend, I'm going to get in shape. It doesn't happen in 3 days. It takes time. And it's the same with medical knowledge. There's so much of it, and it's so detailed, and you're asked so many specific questions and different scenarios that you can't learn it like you could in undergrad in a few days and cram a study guide and then go pass a test. You have to really know it in order to do well in the exams.
That's a really cool analogy. Do you think that just like somebody can get into medical shape, you can fall out of medical shape?
Yeah, definitely.
Do you think the analogy works like that?
If you stop reviewing material, you'll lose it. The key that I've learned, at least for me, some people are different, but is repetition. Like, just seeing the same principle repeatedly over an extended period of time allows you to retain it. But if you stop reviewing, even stuff that you knew really well at one point will be forgotten.
Yeah, that's so true. What's something about medical school that you think most people don't understand?
Just how hard it is in terms of what you're expected to accomplish. Because, you think as a medical student that what you're doing is studying and preparing to take care of patients. But in order to be a good applicant, residency programs want to see more than just good grades and a good exam score on a board exam. They want to see leadership qualities. They want to see that you can do research. They want to see that you're service-oriented. And so building an application for residency is challenging in that you're trying to balance a lot of these extracurricular activities too. You've got, studying for your exams and doing assignments and just learning medicine and gaining knowledge, but you're also trying to fit in, volunteering at clinics and putting together fundraisers and then, trying to come up with projects. And research in medical school is more advanced than what most people would do in undergrad. You've got IRB committees requiring approval for studies involving human subjects, and there's all these hoops to jump through, and there's not like a guide that's like, this is how you be, a successful medical student. Everyone has their own opinion, but in terms of when you start the research and how you go about those extracurriculars, you can get feedback from other older students, but really you just kind of do your best and figure it out on your own and ask around and pray that you're doing things right. So that's to me why medical school is so challenging is it's not just the studying, which in and of itself is very challenging. I look at my wife, she just graduated from PA school or physician assistant program, and she wasn't required to do any research, any service, any leadership. It was, study, pass your exams, and get a job. And they're required to learn a lot in a short amount of time. It's a master's program, so it's 2 years. So adding anything on top of what they were already doing would have been a lot. But still, compared to what's required in medical school, it's a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things that I was really concerned about before going into medical school was physician burnout. I feel like I heard about physician burnout so much in undergrad. Like in all my pre-med classes, it was mentioned. And when I shadowed doctors, I remember seeing some doctors that just looked really tired. Mm-hmm. I remember one general surgeon I shadowed. Every time we'd go in with the patient, he'd be super upbeat, super energetic, and then we'd go back to his office and he would just literally going to his face, just so tired, exhausted. And so it was something that I thought about a lot, and I still think about a lot, is how to avoid that burnout. What are your thoughts on burnout in general? Have you experienced that yet in medical school? Have you found ways to combat that in your own medical career?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think to an extent I've already experienced some of that. Right now I'm preparing for step 2, and every day there's always a little bit of I'm kind of tired of studying. Mm-hmm. But I've been with residents on different rotations, and I've had multiple residents tell me I wish I didn't do medicine, or which was kind of shocking to hear.
Yeah.
But some of them said I'm just exhausted. And one resident told me he had worked 100 hours the past week. And even though there should be a limit of 80 hours now for residents, when it comes to patient care, if you're right at that 80-hour line, and your attending physician is asking you to do something, or you still need to chart for these patients because it just has to be done. It's not like you're going to walk away and say, nope, I hit my 80 hours for the week, I can't write this note. You do it. So,
does that scare you going into
a little
surgical
bit.
Residency, ophthalmology?
I think surgical specialties are challenging in that, a lot of surgical cases just come up and they're emergencies, and you don't know how long they're going to take. Internal medicine, I was surprised. The residents work long hours. They do 6 days, 12-hour shifts, week after week without breaks. And so they're working a lot. But generally, when you're in the hospital on a service, you have a scheduled shift. This is when I start, this is when I stop, and I know someone's going to replace me at this time. But with surgeries, sometimes you don't know how long the case is going to take, and it will go for hours longer than you expected it to. And so that can be challenging with a surgical residency. I think ophthalmology is a little unique in that it's not as demanding. There aren't as many true eye emergencies that require immediate surgery. So I think in terms of their residency program, it might not be as demanding, but something like general surgery certainly requires a lot of time and just unexpected things and stuff like that.
Have you found any ways so far in your medical career to combat that burnout? What advice would you give to someone going into medical school right now, for example, how to manage those first 2 years, long hours of studying, day after day, just endless coursework to get through?
I think for me, something that's helped is scheduling free time or fun time. A couple of years ago, I started playing basketball every Saturday morning at 7, which is early to be playing basketball, but
on a Saturday, yeah.
On a Saturday,
yeah.
But it's like something that I look forward to every week. And things happen. We can't always play every Saturday, but it's something that I look forward to at the end of the week. And I mean, that's not the only time I have fun in the whole week, but I try to like set aside a night with my wife during the week where we're going to do a date night, which usually consists of like playing some board game, or maybe we'll go out to eat. But scheduling some scheduled free time is like something I can look forward to that can give me a break and help me. But I mean, I don't know about you, but when I get overwhelmed and I have a lot to do, I have a tendency to like procrastinate.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd think that, you know, when you have more to do, you're like maybe more motivated because you have a lot to do, but I feel like I'm the opposite. I have a lot on my plate to do, and it almost gets overwhelming, and then I have trouble starting.
There's like a threshold that I reach where if it's too much, I don't do any of it.
Yeah.
If it's just a little bit, I can like motivate myself and be semi-productive, but if it's too overwhelming, I literally will just like ignore it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll kind of shut down, but
it's interesting.
I mean, I read a book about the power of habits, and one of the principles discussed in the book was the principle of small gains or small wins. And so sometimes that comes to mind, and I'm like, I have a lot to do, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to start this one assignment. It's not due soon. It's not the most important thing, but I just need to get something done to start making more progress and to feel like I can get more stuff done. And so sometimes I try to use that to help. But yeah, it's a balancing act. You're always trying to balance studying versus, you know, free time and all these other extracurriculars.
So why medicine? Out of all the careers, what does this career give you that other careers wouldn't be able to give you? I grew up in a household very familiar with medicine. My dad's a physician, my mom's a nurse. My mom's dad, or my grandpa, was also a physician, and so from an early age, you know, I grew up hearing stories about medicine and everything else, and so I had that background, and you know, I saw the way people would interact with my dad at various community events, and people would come up to him and say, "Oh my gosh, like my kid's doing so well now that they had their tonsils out, like they can breathe better," and because my dad's an ENT, and so those experiences I thought were rewarding. Like people looked up to him in the community and stuff like that. But my younger brother had a rare autoimmune disease, HLH. He was in Primary Children's Hospital up in Salt Lake City, Utah for a couple years, basically. He had his spleen taken out. He had chemo. They tried lots and lots of immunosuppressive therapies, and nothing was working. And so eventually, he had a bone marrow transplant. And my brother and I were matches, but I was closer in age. And so typically the closer you are in age, the better off you do, because actually I don't know why, but that's what they told us. Interesting.
The closer the donor and the recipient are, the better off, or the higher the chance of success. So I donated to my brother when I was only like 10 years old, and that was a really meaningful, impactful experience. And I just spent so much time in the hospitals at that time, you know, watching my brother, and I just developed this interest. But when I got in high school, I started, you know, liking my other courses, you know, science and physics and statistics, and I thought maybe I want to be an engineer or an architect. But medicine was something I always came back to, and just decided that it was what I wanted to pursue. And so then I continued to seek out more experiences in undergrad. Shadowing, I did an internship at a hospital, shadowed physicians, did a couple medical service trips, one to the Dominican Republic, one to Las Vegas to take care of like some of the homeless population there. And all of these experiences just kept building, and I don't know. I guess it's kind of like, a sunrise. Like it just starts gradually getting lighter, and then you don't know.
Like when
when it's just bright, but it's like you can see and you just know when it's there. It's like it wasn't a light switch moment of I'm just going to do medicine, but it was all these experiences over time building that influenced me to continue and then apply. So.
And why ophthalmology? Like if you were to talk to a medical student who's trying to make a decision on what field to go into, how would you sell them on ophthalmology?
I think a few things. My grandpa was an ophthalmologist, and so I heard a lot of stories growing up about him. But I think one of the biggest factors to me is that my experiences in ophthalmology. So, I was shadowing in the OR, and this surgeon was doing a lot of cataract surgeries. And there was this one patient that had really advanced cataracts. She had put off getting surgery for a long time because she didn't have the insurance in place or whatnot to get this done. So cataracts are like when your lenses get clouded over time. And everyone on Earth at some point will develop cataracts if they live to be old enough. Like, we'll just all get it. It's part of the aging process of the body. But when they get really advanced, it gets harder and harder to see, and so she had what we call like white cataracts, where she was basically blind. She could sense light, but she couldn't see anything. And so in cataract surgery, they tend to just do one cataract at a time, and then a month later they'll do the other one. And I don't know all the reasons for that, but part of it is, if something were to go wrong with one eye, you'd still have the other, or things of that nature. But anyway, so we just replaced her right cataract, and we put the lens in. And usually, almost right after surgery, they put gauze over, and then they put a little eye cover, a shield, so the patients won't scratch their eye or move it in their sleep or whatever when they're not really meaning to. But before we got the gauze on, she had her lens in, and she kind of looked around, and she was like, "There's people in the room." And
wow.
We all chuckled, and then she held her hand up to her face and looked, and she's like, "I have fingernails." And
wow.
We just chuckled a little bit again, and then I was standing next to her, and she just kind of looks over at me, and she's like, "Do you know how hard it is to clip your fingernails when you can't see them?" And I just shrugged, and anyway, she said thank you probably 20 times before she was wheeled out of the OR suite. And it was just so rewarding in that moment to restore vision. Because vision is like our most important sense, typically. And so to be able to restore that is just so rewarding. And something that I like in general about ophthalmology is there's a blend between surgery and clinic. You get to establish relationships with patients. Some patients will come back to you over and over again. So you can develop that continuity of care. You can work in a group practice. You can work in a private practice. You can work in a hospital. You're not tied to one or the other. So there's options there. And yeah, I just think eyeballs are cool. And vision is it's like a miracle. I don't even understand all of the aspects, but
and to be able to restore that.
Yeah. To think about what it takes to see. Like, light has to come down, reflect off objects. Your eye captures that, converts that light into a chemical and then an electrical signal that gets sent back to the brain that puts it all in order and then associates things with memory. And it's so fascinating how all that works. So
cool.
I could keep you going, but I don't want to bore you too much about it.
No, not at all. In fact, just to extend on that just a little bit more, what gets you most excited about the field of ophthalmology? Like, what keeps you awake at night thinking about, either things that you're excited to get your like hands-on experience with, or maybe advances in the field, or just like where do you think ophthalmology is going to go, or maybe your career in ophthalmology? Like, what are you most excited about?
I mean, new technology is coming out all the time, but I read a article not too long ago that they've identified that some fish regenerate the nerves like in their eyeballs that give them sight. And so like there's a fish where you could like damage its eye and it could regenerate the neurons and still see. And so it's like, well, if fish can do it, maybe humans can do that too. Like, what's different about them that allows them to do that? So it would be incredible someday to take someone that's truly blind and make them see again. And obviously, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why someone could be blind, and even something like that wouldn't work for everyone. But I just think, we've compared to even what we were 50 years ago, like how good the lenses are and everything else, the tools that we use in the field are just so much more advanced. But obviously, I mean, I hope to match into ophthalmology. I haven't matched yet, so I don't think too much about everything that could possibly happen because I'm still not there yet. These are just more wishes and dreams than anything right now, but I just think it's a fascinating field.
Well, we'll have to have you back on in a couple of years when you're matched into ophthalmology properly.
I hope so, yeah.
Shifting just a little bit, but staying on the topic of medicine, I've been thinking about money in the field of medicine a little bit recently. It's interesting how in medical school, money is like never mentioned. And it's almost a bit of a taboo subject. And if you, like, for example, if you were to mention your desire to earn money in your medical school application, like your personal statement or something, I have a feeling there's no like written rule that you can't, but it kind of is looked down upon a bit. Like we're all kind of like, oh yeah, I don't even care about money. But like money is a big factor. And I feel like the more that I interact with physicians during our third year, during our clinical rotations, physicians think a lot about money. Actually, like I was just talking to a neurosurgeon yesterday actually who was breaking down each operation that he does and how much money he makes per operation. And he pulled out like a little notebook where he like tracked it all out and tried to figure out, not necessarily so he could like game the system, but he kind of explained to me that whole system of certain procedures making more money and certain procedures making less money definitely influences the treatment that physicians provide, either consciously or subconsciously, and it kind of just shifts the field. So anyways, what are your thoughts generally on money? Is it something that you think about going into medicine? Do you feel like it'll be is it something you thought about in your decision to get to this point? Do you think it's something that you'll continue to think about? I feel like you actually know quite a bit about finances, and I talked to you quite a bit about your thoughts on this, and I feel like you're very financially conscious in the sense of planning out your future and planning what you want. So I guess what role has that played for you?
Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to admit it, but obviously money is a huge part of medicine in general. And I mean, some people have the opinion that if you choose to go into medicine, it should be purely altruistic. But I mean, it's a career, and at the end of the day, we still need to provide for our families, and so compensation is important, and it's okay to be rewarded for the hard work that you do, and we certainly work hard. But a lot of people get angry at medicine in general because I do think that there are a lot of costs in healthcare that are unnecessary. Specifically, pharmaceutical companies, I feel like all the time charge more for certain drugs than what they ought to. They need money for research, but a lot of their research money is provided by the government anyway. And so they don't need to increase the prices of treatments and medications to the extent that they do. I think for the most part, physicians are fairly compensated for what they do, and it's always going down over time. It feels like, compared to what it was 20 years ago. Off the top of my head, just because I'm interested, I know that, cataract surgery about 20 years ago, a physician used to get reimbursed about $1,000 per cataract or per eye, but now it's about $550, and so it's about halved in the last 20 years. And the technology's actually gotten better. The outcomes are better. There's more data. So you'd think, maybe if you get, a better eye surgery, or it's done, more efficiently, that's something that you should pay more for, because that's how almost everything else is, right? Cars and cell phones, we pay more now than we used to. But with healthcare, some costs are coming down, and to some extent that's fine. That's good. We want to. I'm a fan of making healthcare affordable to an extent for everyone. Like everyone, I feel like healthcare should be a human right. Like everyone should have access to a basic level of care. But when it comes to choosing a specialty or going into medicine in general, it's been a big factor. For me, growing up with a medical background, I always considered it like, I know if I go into medicine and I study hard and I make it through, I'll be able to make a good living for my family, which I don't think is wrong.
Yeah.
But there's a huge variety in compensation among different specialties. And I think that you should pay attention to that, and I think you should pay attention to the cost of your education as well. Not every medical school charges the same. I know of some more private schools that will charge $77,000 a year in tuition. Texas schools in general charge quite a bit less than that. I think UTMB is in the top 25 cheapest programs because they get a lot of state funding. But if you go into medical school and you graduate with $500,000 in debt, and your average interest rate on your loans is like 7 or 8%, which is kind of how things are trending now, that's going to take you the rest of your life to pay off. If you end up practicing as a pediatrician making $150,000, $200,000 a year, because really, you're not making $200,000 a year. Half of that in some form goes to tax. And then you've got other costs of living on top of that: malpractice insurance, disability insurance, life insurance, medical insurance. So the amount of money that you actually have left over to pay back towards your loans is significantly less than that. So, that's why some of these government programs exist. But personally, I don't want to live in the middle of, I don't know, I hate to single any place out, but like the middle of New Mexico for 10 years making minimum payments just so that I can pay off my loans. When I've already dedicated, 12 years of my life after high school just to be able to treat people. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, I think money is again one of those topics that people don't love to talk about, but I think it's important to be aware of the cost of your education and kind of what you expect to earn afterwards. And while you're in training, while you're in school and in residency, minimize your cost of living as much as possible, because a burned out, stressed physician over their finances is probably not going to treat their patients the same as someone that's established financial freedom, that doesn't have those same costs. And so, being free of debt, I think, allows a physician to give back more to their patients than one that's so stressed about money and how much money they can get off their procedures. That probably influences their decision making and stuff like that. So money is important. I think the white coat investor or James Dale, he's an ER physician, has wrote a book called The White Coat Investor, and it's kind of like the Bible for all of medical school now. It's like how you establish your finances and what you should be thinking about. So I think there's resources now to help guide students like us and others about finances, but you can't be ignorant.
Yeah, which is funny because it took some random physician who kind of broke the stigma and said, let's talk about money, to finally get a book out there that teaches medical students and residents how to manage their finances. Like, I feel like there's been kind of this cliche that physicians earn like a reasonable amount of money, but they don't know how to manage it, and they don't really know how to invest it or save it or budget it or things like that. And it's kind of I feel like in my mind that's the negative stigma of money being taken too far, saying like, oh, I'm not in it for the money, so I'm not even going to think about the money. And then the money kind of ends up controlling you in the end because you didn't plan ahead. You didn't think about it. Yeah. Shifting topics just a little bit, you are married to your wife, Aubrey, and you've been married for how long now?
We just had our 5-year anniversary last month.
Wow, congrats.
Thanks.
And you guys are both in the medical field. You said she just graduated PA school, and that's really impressive and admirable to have two people in a relationship, committed even in marriage, more so especially, who are in like a rigorous field of medicine or whatever, just kind of high level education. And I feel like, I don't know, there's a lot that can be learned from that, I feel like. What advice do you have for other couples as far as how to navigate that particular aspect to people in a relationship that are both very busy? Either they're both working, they're both in school. I have a hard enough time managing my own free time with my dog. Like, how do you manage like two busy schedules when you're married? And what have you learned in the last two and a half years of doing that?
It's not easy. But I mean, earlier we talked about, how do we manage studying and being a medical student and everything else that we're expected to do. And I mentioned that scheduling fun time is important. I think when you're in a committed relationship and you're both really busy, scheduling time to be together is also really important. For us, that's kind of Sundays. Like, we both attend church together, and then we have the afternoon and the evening to spend time together. We never, occasionally there's been times where we've had clinic responsibilities on a Sunday, but for the most part, we don't have to show up to classes and everything else. And so it's kind of that one day a week where we just really get to spend time together. At least that's how it's felt the past, 2.5 years of us being in, medical school and her in PA school. A lot of things are fun in that she's seen a lot of the stuff that I've seen, or vice versa, and we get to talk about those things, and we get to talk about, how we would treat patients, or can we believe that we saw this, or stuff like that. So it's kind of bonded us in that, we have a lot in common that we can talk about. I think it would be more challenging for someone that's not in medicine and someone that is in medicine to be in a long-term committed relationship, because the person that's not in medicine may not understand, the dynamics and how time-consuming and how hard it is to be in medicine now. And so I think that could be the source of contention in some cases. But we've been lucky in that, we both matched here, and that was a big source of stress, is finding a place where both of us could go to school. But we've been lucky in that, we can share a lot of these experiences because, we're doing the same thing. I was able to help Aubrey in her second year of school with how she learned in clinical rotations. And in clinical rotations, there's some guidelines and there's some resources, but a lot of what you're expected to learn is just from your experiences, but not everyone gets the same clinical experiences. We're all in different hospitals and clinics, and we have different physicians and stuff. So learning what you need to know for exams can be challenging, but for medical school, there's a little bit more structure, I feel like, than in PA school in terms of what you're expected to learn in each block or rotation. And so I was able to teach her how to use Anki, a flashcard app, to retain information, and she loved it. And throughout second year, she was like one of the only, she's the only student that she knew of in the PA program that used Anki. But she was always stressed before every exam, but she always did really well on all of her shelf exams. And I think she attributed that to, that spaced repetition and that learning. So anyway, there's things that have bonded us, both being in medicine and being able to contribute to each other's learning and study has been fun. But yeah, it's not easy, and I think where I'm at right now, it's going to get harder before it gets better, but scheduling time and scheduling vacations, something fun to look forward to, is, I think, a good strategy that anyone can apply in a difficult situation like that.
It's so cool to hear how bonding it's been for the two of you, because I feel like most of the time all you hear about with two people in medicine or two people working or two people in like a rigorous field is like, don't do it, stay away. So the fact that you guys have navigated that well and are navigating it well currently is just so cool to see. And it makes a lot of sense too, if you guys are both kind of in it together, dedicated towards the same cause, it's gonna bring you together. And I feel like when two people in a relationship are have a different focus, or they don't understand the experiences of their partner, it can be a source of contention, like you said. It can be difficult to kind of relate on that level. So it's really cool. Speaking of motivation and shifting a bit out of medical school and just more your own personal experiences in life, what motivates you, Bryan? Like, what gets you out of bed? Not necessarily even just medicine focused, but like, I don't know, what drives you to consider even like a rigorous field in medicine, or what wakes you up and, I don't know, leads you to pursue a running career in college? Like, what's your drive? What's your motivation? Where does that come from?
That's a good question. I've actually been thinking that a lot lately about other people that I work with. Because for me, it kind of boils down to more of my religious beliefs, and, when you're in the service of your fellow men, you're only in the service of your God. Like, everything that you do for someone else is in some way can relate back to God. And so for me, that's kind of one of my fundamental principles of why I like to serve and help others. And my motivation is to kind of be in good standing with God at all times. But, I see a lot of people that I work with in hospitals, and I don't know all of their religious backgrounds, but some of them have been open about their beliefs, and they're atheist or agnostic, and I don't know why they chose medicine, like what drives them, like why they want to serve, because medicine is a service profession. And so I've wondered, what drives them, what motivates them, but in part right now I'm driven to finish what I started, partly because I hate being defeated and giving up and not being able to accomplish something I set out to do, but partly because, as you mentioned, medicine is a career, it is a profession, it is a way that I can provide for my family. Currently I have a lot of medical school loans and debt, so part of it is fear of what if I didn't follow through? How would I pay off those loans that I've already taken out? Part of it is the reward of, seeing a patient recover. I had a little experience in my family medicine rotation where there was a patient that came in and was very confused about what medicine she was supposed to be taking and when. And so thankfully she had brought everything with her in her purse, and I pulled them out and read through all of them and wrote down on a paper, like, this medication is for your blood pressure and this medication is for your diabetes. And just because she seemed so confused. And they call it a medication reconciliation, but that's the best way to help a patient understand what they're supposed to be taking, is to have them bring everything in and go over that with them and explain to them, this is what this is for and you don't need this anymore or whatever. But after I'd finished talking with the patient and I got up to leave the room, I opened the door and told them I'll be back in just a few minutes. And as I was closing the door, the patient told her friend that was accompanying her, like, oh, he's going to make such a great doctor someday. And I closed the door and I was like, yes, like it was just this moment of satisfaction. Like, I genuinely helped someone today. And, I didn't do much. I just told him, this is this is the medications you're taking and why you're taking them. But just those brief moments of satisfaction is also a motivation to keep going, to continue to experience more of those moments. But yeah, I think it's multifaceted. There's not one single motivator that gets me up every day, but it's a combination of several motivators.
It's a good answer. How do you navigate fear and uncertainty? And this is another general question. It can be in regards to your schooling or your career or just in general. Like, I feel like there's so much fear and uncertainty out in the world right now, and so many people day to day experience so many situations that are challenging and uncertain, and a lot of people have experienced big setbacks in their life. In your experience and with what you've gone through, have you figured out how to navigate those situations which are scary, uncertain, you don't know how it's going to turn out? What advice do you have for people in those types of situations?
Yeah, that's a good question. As you've been talking, I've been pondering, like, what do I do? But I think something that's helped me is I like to reflect on past experiences and past challenging times that I've overcome. And that kind of gives me some hope, some faith to keep going. I mentioned that I ran in college, but when I was in high school, I ran as well, and I had suffered 2 stress fractures in different seasons. A stress fracture is you run so much your bones start to crack, basically, and it's painful. And the best recovery is to just stop bearing weight on the bone that's injured. So you're in crutches for about 6 weeks. 6 weeks is kind of a baseline for how long it takes bones to heal. So my junior year of track, I got a stress fracture just before the state championship meet. It was devastating because I had spent all this time and effort training, and I had to sit on the sidelines in crutches and watch my teammates run without me. And that was really hard. And my senior year of high school in cross country, kind of the same thing happened. I had a goal to run in college just because I thought it would be cool to be a college athlete, and I knew that athletic scholarships were available, and it's just something I was passionate about and I liked, and so I wanted to continue it. So I worked really hard, and I ended up getting a stress fracture in the other leg. And I think part of that was I kind of overcompensated, and then I came back too soon, too fast. And so I was so afraid about hurting my leg, my right leg again. My right tibia is where I had my first stress fracture. That I kind of overcompensated, and I developed a stress fracture in my left femur the next season. And so at that point, I almost gave up on running, and I was like, this is just not for me. I'm not meant to do this. And I guess I just won't be a college athlete, and it is what it is. And I almost didn't even want to compete my senior year in track. But I had a coach, an older coach, and I had this conversation with him, and I asked him, I was like, what would it take for me to run in college? And he's like, well, I think if you ran these times, he told me like a 156 in the 800 and like a 425 in the mile. He's like, I think you could at least walk on to, the team that I was considering. And I was like, oh, that doesn't seem quite as challenging as I thought. That's faster than what I've run previously, but maybe I could get there. I had a higher expectation of what I needed to achieve in my head. So I was like, maybe it won't be so difficult. But I did a lot of research and learned how to cross-train. I ran with like a float belt in the pool so that I could develop my leg muscles in the same way that running does without the impact of running. And it was still a way that I could get my heart in good shape, my cardio up to speed. And my senior year, I did really well. I became a state champion and ended up signing to run in college, and it was really fun and all those things. But the reason why I mention that experience is that, like right now, I have uncertainty about my future, my specialty, what I want to match into. Am I going to be smart enough? Am I going to get a good enough board score to match into what I want to do? But I think back on that experience and think, I've done hard things. I overcame something I thought I couldn't. And all it took was, just taking it a day at a time, focusing on the next meet, the next goal. Before the start of that senior season, I had an ultimate goal of what I wanted to reach, but I broke it down into like sub goals of, this is the ultimate time that I want to run, but I also want to run this time because it was like our school record. And I also want to run this time because this is the time that my coach told me that he thinks I can get. And I want to run this time because, it's my current PR. And then I want to break, 2 minutes at this point because that's a good start to the season. So I broke it down in these like more manageable chunks of like achieve this and then focus on the next part. And I think that helped. And so I guess when it comes to how do I manage fear and uncertainty, a lot of it is just thinking back on past experiences where I've accomplished hard things, recognizing that, what are the lessons or the things that I learned from that? How can I apply that to what I'm currently facing? And then just going for it. Like the more and more people I interact with in medicine too, like I realize everyone's human, everyone makes mistakes, everyone asks for help, nobody's got everything figured out. A lot of it's trial and error. You learn over time with experience, and that kind of gives me hope too. Kind of recognizing that everyone has some level of fear or uncertainty in their career or what they do.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast, Bryan. I'd like to ask you one more final question before we wrap up.
Okay.
What just general advice would you give to someone who's young and thinking about their future?
I'll kind of cheat and give some advice that I was given when I was an undergrad. The president of the university came and talked to us, all of the incoming students, in this big meeting to kick off the year. And what he said is stuck with me over time, but he was like, a lot of you right now that are just starting college may have some idea of what you want to do. A lot of you don't. And you're here because it's tradition, or it's just the next best step, or you don't really know why you're here. You're just figuring it out, and you ended up here because you didn't know what else to do. But he was like, my advice would be, try to achieve the most challenging thing that you think you're capable of doing. And then if it doesn't work out and you fall short, that process of stretching yourself, of trying to achieve the most difficult thing, will have prepared you for a lot of other things that you're also probably going to be happy with. So, he spoke about his own experience in like going to law school and stuff, but for someone interested in medicine, like if you want to go to medical school, like shoot for it, go for it. My recommendation would be spend a lot of time preparing and researching and shadowing. It's surprising to me that, the number of people that I've met so far that are like, man, I don't really like medicine, or I wish I chose a different specialty, or I wish I chose something altogether, and yet they're here. Or they didn't quite realize how difficult it was going to be, and that's some reason, or I've met a student that can't even handle the sight of blood without passing out or thinking about blood, which is interesting because it's like, you probably should have figured that out before getting into medical school. But I really feel for that individual, and I hope that they figure it out. But with more exposure, they get accustomed to it. But spend time figuring out and like researching, is this what you really want to do, and ask people and spend a day in the life of a physician's shoes and shadow them around. Not just one time, I would say, multiple different specialties and physicians over an extended period of time to really figure out, is this what I want to do? And then once you've made that decision, go for it. But if you reach for something really challenging, like getting into medical school or getting into a competitive residency or whatever, and you end up coming short, that process of trying to get there, you'll probably have accomplished a lot of things. You'll probably have studied pretty hard and, done some research or a lot of service or things like that, leadership to get you to that point. And if it doesn't work out, that's okay. A lot of people don't reach their goals all the time, but that process, that journey of getting there has prepared them for something else that they could also pursue. And along the way, they'll figure out, what, I'd also be happy in this field or this career path. So that would be my advice, is to try to achieve the most challenging thing that you think you're capable of. Be a little realistic, but that journey will prepare you for whatever comes next.
That's great advice. Yeah. Well, thank you, Bryan. I feel like you have a lot of really wise words to offer, and it's been enjoyable to learn from you. And I respect you a lot as a peer and as a friend in medical school. So thank you for sharing your thoughts with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm happy to share my thoughts. So I appreciate your example as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Bryan.